Hey guys, this is Jessie, and welcome to Put Some Respect on Your Relationship. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about boundaries. I know I've mentioned boundaries a little bit in some of my earlier videos. Today, we're really going to be going more in depth, defining what boundaries are, and kind of explaining how they play a role in your relationship. Um, so, one of the things that I wanted to do was to do a definition of boundaries. So, personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them, and also how they will respond when someone passes those limits. A lot of the times when we think about boundaries, we think about boundaries when they come to sex. Um, Boundaries are in every part of the relationship. They're in how you guys are going to communicate. Boundaries include how you guys interact with each other, how you want someone to interact with you. So I don't want you to think about boundaries just in a sexual way. Having these healthy boundaries really is something that you're going to build a relationship on. They're your foundation. And it's not just about intimate relationships either. You need to have boundaries with your friends, with your family, with coworkers, with peers. In all of those relationships, there should be some set of boundaries, right? Something that you say, okay, these ways that we interact are all acceptable, and then these ways that we interact are not acceptable. And to give people a clear idea of, you know, these are my boundaries, and when my boundaries are crossed, this is how I'm going to react, or this is the steps that I'm going to take afterwards. Um, so, really, creating boundaries is a good way to keep your relationship healthy. Um, when we start letting people cross our boundaries or our boundaries start to get weak, uh, this really causes people to push. Setting these boundaries helps both you and your partner like really figure out what you want. So if you set these boundaries and you guys might be into the relationship and your partner might say, you know what, there's something that I really would like to do, or there's something that maybe, that you said that this was crossing one of your boundaries, but I'd really like, to have a conversation around that. And you might figure out, you know what, that boundary is not, it's not one of my big ones. Or, yeah, now that we've been together for this amount of time and we're comfortable, like that's something that I'm willing to do. Um, so boundaries aren't made, they're not supposed to make you feel trapped. I think a lot of times what I've heard from youth, especially when we talk about boundaries, is, well, if I have this boundary, then people aren't going to want to date me. Or if I have this boundary, then people are going to talk about me. They're going to think, that I'm a prude or I'm mean or things like that. Your boundaries are something that are going to protect you. They're not there to keep you from different experiences. They're not there to put you in boxes. So these boundaries can also be flexible. Um, like the key to this is when I say, like, when I'm talking about boundaries, I want you to see them as a positive, something that's for you, something that's protective, something that's empowering, right? Uh, you have the power to say what you like, what you don't like, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And boundaries in a relationship, no matter what capacity that relationship is in, they really help support that, so that you're less likely to go along with what someone else wants, because there's something clear and put in place and you're saying, you know what, I already said that that's not something I want to do. And we talked about that. I told you that from the beginning. And then that other person can choose how they move in reaction to you. So yeah, creating these boundaries is not a sign of secrecy or distrust. It really supports trust and communication in a relationship, which are two of the things that we talked about in the previous video about, what is a healthy relationship. Those are both key components of a healthy relationship, and boundaries help support that. Some examples of boundaries. One is saying, even though I'm in a relationship and I love spending time with my partner, I have this certain activity that I'm going to attend all the time. Or saying, my relationships with my family and my friends are really important, and I'm going to devote time to them without my partner. Time for just me and my friends to bond and build our relationship. Time for me and my family members to bond and share our relationship. Boundaries can also come into play when we're talking about our friends and saying, I'm okay with goofing around. I'm okay with horseplay, things like that. But when you tell me I'm stupid or when you make fun of my weight, that's a line. That's something that I don't want you to cross. Boundaries can mean that. They can mean that maybe you're comfortable letting someone follow you on all your social media accounts, but you're not comfortable letting your partner have your passwords. That's fine. That's your boundary. We talked about that a little bit before anyway, like having your own identity in a relationship. And when we start crossing our boundaries and saying, okay, I'm going to let you have the password to my Facebook, my Snapchat, my Instagram, and saying, okay, I know I said I want time with my friends, but I'm willing to put that to the side to go and do stuff with you. Or I know you don't want me to go out today, so I'm not going to. I'm going to stay home. Those are things that then makes the relationship one-sided. So it becomes more about that other person instead of you two together in a partnership. Having clear boundaries and communication helps set the tone for your entire relationship. So in the beginning, if your boundaries aren't clear, or if you don't at least have that conversation with your partner, then you really set everything else up to be a giant gray area. And while flexibility in a relationship is really important, there's things that you shouldn't be flexible on. So setting those things out from the beginning to say, this is really what I expect. This is how I want to be treated. This is how I'm going to act in this relationship. This is what I want to get out of it. Those are all things that when you state in the beginning, you'll be more aware of when those things aren't happening. So it's a lot easier to see red flags or potential problems when you've said that in the beginning, right? So if your boundaries aren't clear, or you're not really sure what your boundaries are yet, as you guys are, entering relationships, coming out of relationships, going into new relationships, it's okay to not know exactly what your boundaries are. That's something you work on your entire life. I'm still working on some of mine. They change, right? So they can change and will change as you grow and you change and you experience different things. And boundaries can change from relationship to relationship. So depending on your partner, depending on, the level of respect you guys have for each other, the level of trust, boundaries can change. You can have different boundaries for your friends than you do for your family, different boundaries that you have for your partner, right? In each of these areas, there's going to be different things that you're willing to do or not willing to do. So just knowing that when you go into a relationship, saying, you know what, I don't really know how I would feel about if that certain situation was to happen, and knowing it's okay that when you get there and you're experiencing it and you say, you know what, this doesn't feel good, or this feels icky, or I'm not comfortable with this, that's when you make your boundary, and that's when you say, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't like that. I didn't appreciate when you did that. It made me feel this certain type of way. Um, it's okay to do that in the moment as well. It's never a wrong time to say, hey, here's my boundary and you crossed it, or to not do something because it doesn't make you feel good or you don't feel good about it. So I'm going to be old for a minute. Whenever I think about boundaries, I always think about Meatloaf and his song, I'll do anything for love, but I won't do that. And I just think that, boundaries are a beautiful thing. And developing them, working on them, checking in with yourself about your boundaries is something that I learned way later on that I wish I would have known more of. And that comes from boundaries with work too, with school, setting time aside, knowing how to organize my time so I'm not always working or always doing school. And I'm making time for my friends and making time for the people in my life I care about. That's a part of boundaries too, right? Having balance. Also, something I learned probably in the last couple of months that I wanted to share with you guys, because it really hit home for me, is that Brene Brown said, when you agree to do something and you start to feel resentment towards the person, that's when you know you've crossed your own boundary. So a lot of times we feel pressured to say yes. We feel pressured to do things for people, help people move, take people to go do things. That could be helping someone with homework. It could be just exerting time when you don't have it yourself. And a lot of the times we want the people in our lives to be happy. We want the people we care about to be happy and successful. And we feel the need to say yes. But when we say yes and it doesn't make us feel good, and we start to feel angry towards that person or resentful towards that person, that means that we crossed one of our own boundaries. And it could have been a time boundary. It could have been a lot of things. But I just thought that was interesting, to say, there's times when we cross our own boundaries. It's not always about other people crossing them. So that's why I say, I don't want you to think of boundaries as you being in this box, or preventing you from experiences. They're really a way to help support you, and keep you happy and healthy and safe. So please don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, I have the link down at the bottom to take the survey. Either if you have questions about boundaries, you have examples of boundaries that you would like to share or like to talk about. If you have any questions about some of the examples I went over today, some things that maybe weren't too clear, or if you just want to mention a topic you'd like me to talk about, please click on the link, and fill out the survey. I'd really like to start doing some more topic-specific stuff in this show, and that will help me figure out what you guys would like to know more about. So till next time, don't forget, put some respect on it.